Hi, everybody. Gavin Coyle. I'm the Gaffer. We're back again with a great guest. Rob Munns is head of sales at BFT Mast Climbing. He supports contractors in finding faster, safer, and more cost-effective access solutions for construction projects. With experience in customer engagement, client development, and strategic business growth, he works closely with project teams to challenge traditional approaches to access and demonstrate how mast climbing can offer a smarter alternative to conventional scaffolding. And I'm looking forward to understanding both the principles and the economics of how that can make a benefit to your organization. Well done, Rob. Thanks for joining us today. Whereabouts in the world are you?
No, thank you for a great introduction. So I'm sitting to you in sunny Leighton Buzzard, where our head office is based. So just outside, I guess, London or Luton Airport off the M1 is where our head office is based.
Cool. So not far from the airport is always a good thing.
Yeah, I was up in Scotland earlier in the week visiting a client, and yeah, very convenient from Luton Airport back out.
Well, let's get straight into it. Yeah. So, mast climbing, for those who don't understand mast climbing as opposed to platforms or scaffolding or access platforms, give us the, ABC general. What is a mast climbing piece of equipment or process?
Hey, it's where I started myself 6 years ago. I had a 20-year career in a completely different industry, and came into the construction industry about 5.5 years ago to do this job. So I started by asking daft questions in the industry of why, what, and all the rest of it. And a lot of people, start off that question with, what is a mast climber? It's a bloke climbing a mast. Is it on a boat? What is it? Best way, especially for any of your listeners, you're driving at the moment, you haven't got time to look up on the internet. Think of motorized scaffolding. So instead of having multiple lifts of scaffolding on a building, you have one. You now actually have the power at your fingertips with the push of a button to drive that lift of scaffolding to any height within a centimeter or an inch of where exactly you need to be. Okay. They can come in multiple sizes. They can come in multiple shapes. We can talk about some of the bespoke adaptations that can be done. So we can get round corners, around balconies, into recess areas, lots of different clever things. But in terms of that mental image of what on earth is it? It is a mast that attaches securely to the side of a building, of which the platform is then attached to the mast, and that is driven by the operator up and down the side of the building. So hopefully that goes, yeah, I think I get it. But it's also helpful for me to add what it is not. What it is not is a cradle. A cradle is a top-down approach that is on suspended steel cables. And a lot of people are, no, I wouldn't want to get inside those. Now, again, they are a very viable option for certain jobs, but one of the main differences, a mast climber is secured to the side of the building and from bottom up, whereas the cradle is suspended access down.
Okay, how do you attach that, the obvious question, into the physical structure, or if there's no structure or very little of a structure?
Okay, so realistically, into the slab, the face of slab is our typical attachment point, although there are multiple options in terms of, on top of slab, underside, and other variants. We can do steel frame, we can do timber frame as well, but we don't do a freestanding mast climber. So you do need to be securely attached to the building. And as we'll get into in terms of the commercials of when you start considering mast climbers over scaffolding, realistically, 4 stories is probably at what we call the break-even point, when the direct cost comparison of mast climbers to scaffolding is about even. 5 stories, you start to see the savings come through. 6 and above, it becomes a no-brainer. But if you've got a house or maybe a townhouse, 3-story building, realistically, your right approach on that is probably going to be scaffolding.
So you're basically riding an elevator on the outside of the building as opposed to inside the building.
A long elevator, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. It's an elevator that can be designed to put, if you've got a 30-meter wide elevation, you can have a 30-meter long platform. It would be a twin machine, so 2 drive units.
Yeah.
that would then be able to take you and cover the whole elevation.
Brilliant. So talk to me about that drive then. What is that drive? Is it mechanical belt driven drive, or is it hydraulic drive, or what sort of a
So yes,
mechanism?
it's an electric motors that drive a rack and pinion system to go up the building. So once it's at the working height, you take your finger off the button. That
Yeah.
then closes the air brake, so when it's not drawing any power and it's effectively locked in place.
Okay.
When you then go to little adjustments as your work level increases, or you're due to come down, by pressing the button, powers, air brake opens, allowing the machine to then move up or down that mast.
Wow. So just for clarity purposes, for anybody listening or watching, you can go completely geek on us on this. We've a full grad to go geek on us in terms of telling us how this works, because it's pretty interesting in terms of if it's applied in the right model, and we see this all over the world. Cladding would be a classic example, or glazing would be a classic example, where this solution is just a no-brainer in terms of manual handling, safety, in terms of efficiency, in terms of productivity. Um, I'm just curious to know, does the manufacturer sign off on allowing materials to be loaded inside the platform?
Yeah, so how it works is always use a reputable provider. It goes without
Mhm.
saying. The manufacturer should have machines that meet the European standards and British standards for mast climbing. So for BFT, we have two different manufacturers, one based in Spain, one based in Portugal.
Yeah.
So from that, they give us certain configurations of a machine. So again, a twin machine could be 20 meters long with a wing of 2.5 meters each side, the other side of the drive unit. There's certain configurations that are signed off as standard. And
Yeah.
with that configuration, I would grant you a 2.5 ton payload. That's how we hand it over to you as a client, so you know what you can use in the center span and on the wing. If you
Okay.
turn around to me and say, Rob, I need 3.5 ton on this machine, there might be certain configurations that I say, Gavin, I'm confident that's not a problem. We'll take that to the manufacturer and they will then sign that off for us to say, yes, absolutely, that is an approved use of the mast climber. We give you the certification. And I guess some suppliers don't have that ability to have that direct communication with their manufacturers. Whereas I said, everything that we'll do is signed off for your own peace of mind from that safety aspect.
Yeah, like that's where people get themselves in trouble. We see in the past where they're using MUPs or MBWPs, and then there might be screwing a bit of ice stud drywall to the side of the machine and then carrying plasterboard,
And I
losing the
think
gravity of the machine, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I think what's so important there for everyone to understand is, as we get deeper in of what mast climbers can do, a mast climber can go around the corner, it can go into a recess area, it can go around balconies. They're no longer just straight line platforms;
Really?
they're very
Okay.
adaptable. But when you do the adaptations, is when you start attracting the I guess the risk factor.
Yeah.
So one example that I'll share with you, Gavin, is the mast climber itself is set 150 mil off the outside of the building.
Okay.
Okay, so a very common question I get from contractors is when that whatever trade is working in that platform, bricky, window glazer, curtain waller, there is a small gap. There is a chance, therefore, that something could fall down the gap between the platform and the building.
Yeah.
What is your solution, mast climber supplier? So at BFT, we have, what's imaginatively called a drop-down flap or a gap closure device. So that goes from the handrail of the mast climber out towards the facade. So it closes the gap, and we can go out to close any gap up to 440 mil. Okay. That means that where I'm working, if I were to drop a tool or materials or anything, it hits the flap and then comes back into the machine.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that
Okay.
device has got an electromagnetic switch on it. So
Okay.
when that's deployed, the mast climber cannot move. This is the
Okay.
really key integral part, because what we have seen of photographs and other, shall we say, man-made adaptations to mast climbers, where some people on site have got creative and they've just used a bit of plywood. Now, the problem with that is that naturally causes you other health and safety concerns, because now the plywood doesn't have a limiter switch, and thus if you were to move the mast climber, you run the risk of entrapment, or worse still, that actual bit of plywood snapping, breaking, snagging on the facade and falling down itself. So this is why it's so important when you're talking safety elements on a mast climber. Talk to your the company, get the certification from the manufacturer of these kind of additional safety features that mean that they are suitable for use on the buildings.
Very good. So I am on one of the so-called leading construction websites here, and an alert came out basically on these pieces of kit saying, yes, they rely on two independent motor drive units, as you said, per mast, as the means to prevent the platform falling with overspeed. It says, are not fitted with suitable and sufficient controls to manage the risk. Failures in drive units can be such that neither the centrifugal brakes nor the automatic brakes within the drive units are able to have an effect. Malfunctions in drive units which endangers proper function are foreseeable unless a means of detection of such malfunctions is provided. There is a risk of platforms falling with overspeed. Talk to me on that.
Yeah, so effectively, the BS 7981, the British standards for mast climbers, what that effectively means is that you as a user need to make sure that this mast climber, if you're working at level 6, that is secure at level 6, and it cannot just suddenly fall, plummet, call it you like. So you correctly stated the majority of mast climbers out there have two independent motors that make up a drive unit. Now, first, some mast climbing platforms out there have what you've also described as an overspeed brake. Okay, so if, for example, the power was cut off to a site, and I'm at level 4 and I need to descend the mast climber, there is a manual descent system. If I were to open that and the mast climber were to travel at a faster speed than it is than it should do, so the 8 meters per minute is normally the speed, the overspeed brake, like in many hoists, would fire.
Okay.
Now that then obviously secures the mast climber in place, but it's not at the bottom, so you now need to rescue that user from the platform. Importantly, this is where I want to make clear in terms of my own kind of knowledge, the BFT do not have any with that feature on it. Okay, we don't use that, so I wouldn't want to talk out of turn about any of those kind of devices. BFT have two units with the double the centrifugal brake to make sure that that could never cause you a safety concern.
Okay.
The further notice that the British standard came out was actually having the ability to detect a differential in the power consumption by those two independent drive units. So if you've had a catastrophic failure of a pinion or a gearbox in one of those, the second motor would now be working much harder.
Yeah.
Okay. So our relay cuts the power to the machine as soon as you start driving it, if there is a problem with one of those motors. So you come in on Wednesday morning and somebody's potentially vandalized, something's happened to the machine. Effectively, you can't get yourself into a dangerous situation because the machine will cut itself off because it has detected a differential greater than 15% between the two drive units.
Okay.
Again, my lesson or word to your audience is no two mast climbers are the same. No two mast climbing companies are the same. This isn't an out-and-out pitch, but please, please, please question the mast climbing provider about exactly this, and don't just take a piece of paper from them as, oh yes, we're fine, we're covered, as evidence that they are covered. Ask them to show you, ask them to invite them to your premises, and they will be or should be able to give you a full safety demonstration demonstrating how that feature works.
Okay, could we ask them for a design risk assessment?
They should be able to supply you exactly that with their manufacturer's details on it of exactly how their system conforms to the requirements of the market. And I would actively encourage those kind of questions. I don't hear them anywhere near enough in construction. I hear a lot of kind of questions about price, about lowest cost in the tender.
industry.
I don't hear enough about, can you run me through your safety systems?
Yeah, there should be, well, by law, they should be providing you with a design risk assessment, because they're providing a temporary piece of equipment which falls under the temporary works model as well. So there should be temporary work allowed for, and the temporary work process allowed for, you would imagine, in this, because it's not a fixed permanent structure like any other temporary structure. It's a temporary structure that needs to be overseen by temporary works, you would imagine, and then there's a design risk assessment to be done that backs up why I'm using this platform, why there's 2 drives on it, why it's carrying the load it's carrying, and it shouldn't carry any more than that, and so on and so forth. So your due diligence is what you're saying, Rob. If you don't do your due diligence, you could be putting yourself at a bit of risk.
Yeah, I genuinely think that the challenge in the construction industry that I've seen over the last 5 years, and different trades, different different sectors, different niches have the same kind of challenge. That with a race to the bottom on price, that can cause distraction of exactly what the procurement team, the supply, are looking at on the contractor. They've got to focus more on quality and almost final price, because you buy cheap, you get cheap. You also cause problems to your program, to your construction project, and you wonder why you've then caused yourself more issues. So it really is a case of getting in deep and understanding these elements, because otherwise, if the lowest common denominator of any industry is not the right standard to mark the whole industry by.
Yeah. Okay, and I see there's organizations like IPAF that are running courses in order for people to operate and safely manage or oversee the management, or just generally operate these pieces of equipment. Are they mandatory competency courses that people have to take in order to manage and have oversight, but also operate these pieces of kit?
Yeah, so in the same way, very common bits of equipment on a construction site. You take your MUPs that you've mentioned, so your forklift, your small things like, they all need a MUP ticket. So that's an IPAF MUP operator's ticket.
For the UK.
That's it. That's for 5 years. In the mast climber world, it is a 5-year ticket to operate a mast climber, and it's simply the different acronym, the MCWP card, that you would need to do. So BFT do all the training. So we're, again, the largest provider of the training in the UK. And there's different levels that I'll briefly explain to simply operate machines. So the legislation states that minimum of 2 people need to be on a mast climbing work platform at any one time. One of those has to have the IPAF operator card. We advise that the more training, and therefore if both operators were fully trained, the better. But the minimum standards is to have one with the IPAF operator card. The next level up is an IPAF demonstrator card. And that we encourage the facade manager or the black hat, or one person with a bit more responsibility, and they then are responsible doing the weekly checks on the machine, and also can familiarize anybody who's coming to that site who does have an operator card from a different site, which maybe has a slightly different type of mast climber. Your IPAF demonstrator can familiarize them on the machine they'll be using on this current site. Does that make sense as the difference?
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. Okay. So they're not trying to train her, but they know just as much about the piece of equipment in order to familiarize people with the equipment, but they're not signing off on people as competent in order to operate the system. Or operate the platform. Yeah. Interesting.
While we mention the IPAF, the other one I'd want to really kind of go, and it kind of comes back to the British standards, and then how do you know if you're dealing with a quality provider? So there's an IPAF Rental Plus accreditation that suppliers of mast climbers in the UK can achieve. What that does is that looks at all the maintenance procedures behind the scenes, if you like, of what happens to that mast climber before it comes to your site, after it comes to your site, before it goes to the next site. So when you really then understand the maintenance protocols that are happening, that's when you gain even more confidence in the quality of the machines that are then coming to your sites. So again, that's just something for your listeners to also look out for, to make sure that the supplier has that.
Well done. Okay, cool. So we've covered off the fact of competency training, inspections. Obviously, do you do the independent inspections? Is that 6 monthly, or it's weekly visual and 6 monthly overview, total overhaul, or what way is the regulations on that?
With one additional step, to be honest, Gavin. So the IPAF demonstrator on site would do the weekly. We as the owners of the machine, will come out and reissue the Lola certificate and do a 6-month thorough examination. But what we do, the manufacturer guidelines on machines are typically having an 8 to 10 week inspection. So where we would come out on that 8-week kind of period. At BFT, we actually do it every 6 weeks. So we just shorten that window to come out to site and just make sure, that we're happy with the performance of the machine, drive it up to full height and back down. We're also therefore looking at the daily and the weekly inspection sheets that we've given to make sure those inspections are happened. If they're not, that's where, again, we will then go back and have those conversations with the site supervisor and the site teams to make sure that they're happening. Sadly, we're all busy, or the sites are all busy. When you give someone that tick box, you've got to make sure that it's not just being done as a tick box, because it is a safety check that needs to be done.
Do you have to do work at height, rescue at height training as part of the training?
Not at that level, no.
Okay, but what happens if you don't need a rescue kit in the platform in case I'm stuck up on the 15th floor of a tower?
So no, there's as part of the RAMs that we will then that you'll do on site for, obviously every site is different, and therefore every site has a different set of RAMs. The RAMs, we can help and assist with regards to what that would look like and to have a rescue plan, but no, you do not need to have a harness inside the mast climber. And you do not need to have, some people then talk about a hammer or something like that to break into a window. All those are then, options of how you get down, but you don't need to have that inside every single mast climber that's there. So, it's fair to say at this stage, in terms of, I don't get involved myself with advising on the RAMs, plans with customers. So, I wouldn't want to overstep my qualifications here at all. But we can, as a BFT, via either our Czech director or our operations team, help customers understand what the different options are when looking at your RAMs and any plans like that. Bear in mind, if the power gets cut, the first and foremost thing is the manual descent system on the mast climber to drive the mast climber down to the bottom. So it's very, very rare that you would need to then instigate a rescue plan from a mast climber from anything above ground floor, because at all times it should then be able to just return quite simply to ground. On the rare occasions that it can't, yes, that's when you're looking at exit internally onto the building, or absolutely worst case scenario, but that's the part of the planning. Yes, it would then be a call to the fire brigade for a rescue from height.
Okay, interesting. And what about the sorry for pounding your questions here, but it's very interesting. What about the meters per squared or minutes per squared speed on any given day during the winter? Am I okay to use that piece of equipment, or to just call it as a risk assessment of myself and the team on the day? Or are you saying once you go over a certain level that we're saying you need to shut the system down and the system becomes inoperable?
Yeah, it's again fair question. I think there's a lot of myths out there about the use of mast climbers, and part of my job is to understand where the myths come from, to provide the education. But certainly when people make that comparison between a mast climber site or a scaffold site, and they think, oh, these mast climbs, they're going to be winded off, or weather's going to be a problem. If you really look at the sites now, a tower crane gets winded off typically at 32.5 mile an hour.
Okay.
The mast climbers 33.5 mile an hour. So your first alert that the wind speed may be of an issue will be if your tower crane is winded off.
Yeah.
Now, the important thing about the mast climbers is a mast climbing wind speed is at the level that you are working at. So 22-story building, tower crane's been winded off. I'm at level 8 on the work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily mean that I cannot continue to work. So
Yeah.
you would have a handheld anemometer. So
Yeah.
that's what we'd advise the sites to use. If you are in any way concerned, you take a wind speed measurement. Now, bear in mind, the reason for a wind speed guidance with a mast climber is nothing to do with the mechanical element of the mast climber. When Storm Eunice, or whatever name we're up to these days, rips through in February or March, typically, there is not a mast climber that then needs to have, any repair work done to it. We hear about lifts of scaffolding where the monoflex has got a kite effect, and that they then need thorough inspections to see if there's any, trusses that have been, out of place. The mast climbers can be built to withstand all the, all those kind of 80, 90 mile an hour wind speeds. But the reason for the 33.5 user speed is if you are at level 20 and you stand side on with a cladding panel, that's where it could likely, become kite effect, and that panel, so that's the reason. Sometimes it's just helpful understanding, people understanding, well, why is there a wind off speed?
Yeah.
Is the machine shaking around and things like that? No, it's not.
Mhm.
So yeah, handheld anemometer that proves the wind speed. But from a productivity point of view, you typically find you still get just the same amount of done on a windy site, whether it's scaffold or mast climbers, due to the fact that when the tower crane's down, the whole site stops on a scaffold fed site. Whereas on a mast climber, it's the wind speed at the working height that can still allow work to happen. And also, if the wind's battering the north elevation, quite often the south elevation is relatively sheltered, and therefore work can still go ahead.
That's a good point. That's a great point. You'd know your business when you say something like that. You'd never think about north facing wind, south facing wind, east facing wind. We'll just go around the other around the corner and do the other side. It makes total sense, doesn't it? Hello.
And I guess it's when people think about using mast climbers, there's a resistance to change, and that's the challenge in the construction industry. Full stop. Right? It's kind of, I'll stick to what I know because it must be the safest thing. But actually, the more you examine the behaviours of, I don't know, a gang of 8 people erecting a scaffold, or a gang of 2 people erecting the mast climber, not having to have 5 or 6 deliveries to site, walking around with 12-foot boards and poles, but actually having 2 people go to site. We've got our own HIAB on our transport, and if we can get within 18 metre reach of the elevation, we're completely self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Suddenly, that's a huge amount of material and labour movement that you've reduced on site. Yeah. And as we all know, well, if you reduce the movement of material and labour, you will reduce your accidents, your slips, bumps, trips and falls significantly.
Yeah.
So it's things like that that make a huge difference as to why mast climbers are shown to be, a safer form of access.
So when you arrive to site and the scaffolders see you guys taking your kit off and getting ready to set up, is it going to be us and them scenario with you and scaffolders?
Hopefully not. Now we're not out here to say. Hopefully it's.
Now, don't give me a political answer here now.
Sitting on the fence, you can tell I'm squirming. No, whilst we sell against scaffold in the sense of if a contractor's got a 15-story building and they're currently thinking about scaffolding it, I would suggest that there's an alternative that would benefit the contractor to use mast climbers rather than scaffold in the vast majority of cases. Okay. That said, there is an absolute paramount need for scaffolding on site, for edge protection, for gantries, for public protection, for fans, for all those other elements. So on a lot of these big construction sites and a lot of the small ones, and we'll come on to a cladding remediation project in a second, but it's a hybrid solution. Now, we work closely with a lot of scaffolders, and actually BFT as a company, BFT stands for boards, fittings, tubes. We used to, when we were founded, be a scaffolding firm. Now, if you take a cladding remediation job, so it's a live occupied building, public and construction meeting. So from a risk point of view, that's an alarm bell straight away. Now, what the ideal scenario is you put a scaffolding gantry or support round the fire exits, the front door, the rear door, bin stores, and anything that the public needs to access. Protect it with a scaffold. The mast climbers can sit on top of the scaffold, or we can still sometimes base them on the ground and build a scaffold around it and then limit the mast climber so it doesn't come down into the scaffold. But then the vertical access is done with mast climbers. Because interestingly, from a resident's point of view, you don't want your building wrapped in scaffolding for 12 to 18 months, longer from some of the horrific stories I've heard. Because that, from a safety point of view as well, is a climbing frame wrapped around the building, which gives anybody, and I mean anybody, access to anywhere at any time. And we've heard stories from contractors where residents, through frustration, I presume, are gaining access onto the scaffold and causing issues to the workers. On the 18th floor of a scaffold with wooden decks that's there to do fire remediation work.
So talk to me about the economics then. Do you have any worked examples of why it's cheaper to use your product as opposed to scaffolding, or cost efficiency models that you have when you go into, say, Skanska or whatever else and go, here, you can't tell me that this price is better than this when my kit can do this and that won't be able to do that?
That's it. You know, this bit, it makes it a bit of a no-brainer in the sense that, as I said, 5 stories, 4 stories really break-even point. 5 stories depend. You know, have you got an expensive scaffold quote, cheap mast quote? There's different variations that are out there. But from 6 stories and above, you should be able to show a saving, a direct saving, and I'll explain the reason why I emphasize that word: a direct saving, mast climbers over scaffolding. Typically, we find on the case studies we run anywhere between 10 and 15% savings at the 6-story level. The higher you go, so we take a 15-story building, then I would estimate that to be about a 50 to 60% saving from the cost of scaffold to the cost of mast climbing. Huge numbers, and especially when you consider the client or the person paying for some of this, especially in the cladding remediation market, is the taxpayer. That's why I'm so passionate about trying to get this right, because you know there's a huge amount of money at stake that's being spent in an area that there is a far safer and more efficient solution that can be used. It's done because of time. Mast climber, a 40-meter elevation, our guys will erect that to full height in 2 days. You're then working on that on day 3. The scaffold equivalent, best case scenario, will be just over 20 days. Okay, wow. Even if that's a beautifully square building, which in these days it very rarely happens. But 4 elevations, that means 80 days on the scaffold, best case, and 12 days worst case scenario on the mast climber.
And a lot more removable parts on the scaffolding that can go wrong.
Absolutely. You know, you must know yourself from all your experience on sites. If a scaffold clip or something like that's fallen, then that causes a huge amount of kind of risk and concern. There's far less components with the mast climbers, so from that element, it's another reason why they should be given far more consideration than potentially they are in a lot of occasions.
I remember, I take it you're only talking about the efficiency of the equipment, but you're not actually talking about the efficiency of the productivity of the cladding guy or the glazer or the plaster or wherever that is, the bricklayer. Like the time efficiency, you're not even calculating that into that model.
No. To try and be fair when we do it is exactly that. We could stand in front of a client and say, look, you're going to gain 2 weeks of program time because the facade is clear. You're not working around scaffold trusses or on hop ups and hop downs. it's almost working around your access system. You're actually working with it with a mast climber. One of the biggest injuries or challenges, I guess, from a health and safety element in the construction industry, musculoskeletal injuries. It's a heavy, hard manual trade. If you take a bricklayer, where do they ideally want to be laying a brick? About 1.1 meters, waist height. Yeah. What they don't want to be doing is laying them at their toes, what they call it in the trade, the nosebleed, or above their shoulders, the overreach.
Yeah.
Again, both those happen on those scaffold lifts, depending on what then hop ups and the scaffold adaptations that you have. On a mast climber, all trades work at exactly the right height. So whether you're lifting a 2x1 cladding panel or a brick, or you're just doing painting work, you're never overstretching. So back problems, lifting injuries, things like that, again, are significantly reduced because of where it gets the workers to do. As a result of laying your bricks in exactly the right height and not having to stretch or not, productivity increases, and so does quality.
Yeah. So where is this gonna be in 10 years' time or 15 years' time, the industry of mast climbing? Like, is it going to evolve into something else, or is it here to stay as it is in its current format?
I think the basics of it. So when I say the basics, you mean drive unit, metal platform, modular deck system, bespoke adaptations. So the essence of a giant Meccano set, if you think of that I don't think will change much. I think the mechanical aspects sometimes keep it simple when it works, right? I think what will start changing is the need for information in our industry that demands more numbers and more understanding. So we are looking at developing smart mast climbers. So on a hoist, you can get telematic information of how many journeys has it done, what weight is it carrying at any particular point. You can get those kind of reports. It's things like that I can see in 10 years' time, that kind of information will start becoming more affordable to get with mast climbers, because at the moment those solutions are available, but they are expensive, and therefore when you're doing comparisons, construction companies don't see the value at the moment in the MI that you can get to warrant the additional expenditure. So that's certainly where I'd be excited about the future of it. Would be continued development around the proof of productivity and efficiency that makes even more people sit up and go, wait, so it's faster to install, it's safer for my teams to use, and it's more productive and it's cheaper. Okay, hang on, Rob, where do we sign? We need to talk more.
Yeah. So if I'm building a hotel, 15-floor hotel, typically what kind of budget would I need to set aside?
Well, trying to not give you a politician answer there. It depends. How long is this hotel? Does the hotel have balconies? Are we going around protrusions? So I think realistically, if I was to give you a ballpark figure, you're probably going to be looking at anywhere between 300,000 to 400,000 on a mast climber solution versus 800,000 to 900,000 on the scaffold solution.
So 800 to 900,000. Wow.
So at 15-story, you'll be looking at over a 50% saving if you use mast climbers versus scaffold.
Wow.
Now, bear in mind, one of the things is the weeks that you need it for. You will need the mast climbers for less than you would need scaffold for, because of the install and the dismantle periods being so much greater.
Yeah. Wow. Shit.
There's some serious, and this, when I look at, particularly passionately, I've interviewed numerous residents who have been stuck behind scaffolding on cladding remediation projects, and that's one of the things that still boggles my brain. I had a tier 1 contractor who will remain nameless. We were tendering for their works on a 18-story tower block, and I had spoken to the QS, and I'd done my homework, if you like, and got a figure out of them for the scaffold. So I knew the scaffold was just over 750,000. I was feeling very comfortable when I then tried to speak to then the head of decarbonisation, because it was a social housing decarbonisation project, and our price was 320,000, so over half the price. And his comment to me was, "I'm sorry, Rob, your price doesn't work for us."
Wow. Wow.
Huge savings to them, but our price didn't work for them.
Well, that you actually said something there that kind of we never even spoke about, was the environmental impact and carbon footprint calculation in itself is another calculation that probably, I don't know, have you modeled that out as well for your customers?
Sadly, dare I say, a lot of contractors, they don't ask that information. So I've only ever got slightly into the weeds with one of them, as I've been helping with the social value kind of impact.
Yeah.
Very quickly, per elevation, you're probably saving yourself 4 out of 5 deliveries by using mast climbers over scaffolding, depending on which scaffolding firm and the availability of their transport and the size of the wagons that they have access to.
Yeah.
You've also only got a gang of 2 installing a mast climber, so that's 2 people either getting to the yard to share a van to come in or making their own way to a site, versus a gang of 6 to 8 on the scaffold. And again,
Yeah.
that's a lot of different carbon footprint on their different journeys that you would then map out.
Yeah.
So yeah, straight away, there's definitely further maths that could be done, probably by someone cleverer than I, who could then start, showing and demonstrating the impact. It's a lot of construction, traffic to these projects. And when they start measuring that carbon footprint, even if you just stand back and you look at a building that's covered in scaffold and is covered in mast climbers, aesthetically and the environmental element of it, I pity anybody who, especially as we're now coming into the summer. I hear my colleagues, talking, especially in construction. Some of us aren't blessed with the most how should we describe it? The best office space. It's quite often your air conditioning unit is a fan. It's not the most comfortable environment sometimes, and that's just life in construction. But I don't have to live there. When it gets, I'm opening some windows, but it's uncomfortable. But I get to drive home.
Yeah.
For those residents, they don't have that option. Their windows are closed. They've got a climbing frame wrapped around it, and that's life for 18 months. That's really hard to comprehend.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why, I try to take every opportunity I can to speak with clients, with contractors, to understand that, no, I'm sticking to scaffold. Okay, let me understand why. Have you had a really bad experience on a mast climber before? And let me understand why that wouldn't happen if you use BFT.
Yeah.
Is it because, what is the reason that scaffolding has been led as the default method of access? And let me help understand and therefore solve whatever those kind of solutions are. Because there's only 2 types of building really that are not suitable for mast climbers. So I think it's only fair, if you don't mind me, I'll just kind of indulge me with that. If a building steps in, so you go up 2 stories in a bit, up another 3 stories in a bit, those kind of buildings, it's not for a mast climber. That's going to be a scaffold or a different access solution.
Yeah.
The other one is what I call our creative architect friends. If they've scattered balconies all over the place. So if a balcony or any protrusion is linear all the way up the building, perfect for mast climbers. We can put extensions around it to provide full access around that protrusion. Same with a recess. But if those balconies are spread, across the building, that then makes it very difficult to mast climbers. So if you have a building that isn't stepped and doesn't have irregular protrusions, non-linear protrusions, then there's a very, very good chance that I'll be able to help you save a lot of money and time with the access.
Wow. We're coming near the end of the show, Rob. So you wouldn't believe we're going into like 40 minutes.
Yeah, just looking at the clock, I realised I've probably been talking too much, is what that means.
No, I tell you what, whoever gave you that job, you're the right man for that job. Let me just tell you that. No
I
question.
appreciate it.
A couple of curveball questions at you, just to throw a few bits and pieces on the left field, if you like. Knowing what you know now, Rob, what would you do different in life?
I missed the end of the question. So, knowing what I know now, what would I do differently in life?
Yeah, yeah,
Enjoy it more. is is probably the truth of it. I think a different part of what I'm passionate about is mental health. I do a lot of work for Movember. I think I've spent a lot of my time worrying about worrying. And not enough time being present. I've got two kids, 13 and 15. Enjoy the moment. It's too many of us are stressed about tomorrow, and today's right in front of us.
I love it. I love it. If I was to tell you that you could take the next month off and go away somewhere, where would that location be and why?
I've got multiple answers to that. We've in fairness, the wife's just been recovering from a bit of a health scare, which has kind of asked us to kind of have that kind of thing of what is your bucket list? What does it look like? I'd love to do a Lions tour to Australia. I love my rugby, and to follow the Lions down Australia or New Zealand, phenomenal. I'd love to do it. I'd love to just do a simple hire a motorhome and drive around Ireland. The West Highland Way on the Southwest Coast. Beautiful places, coastline. Even just exploring, Scotland and other parts of the UK, but almost just don't use motorways, don't use that, and just use all those lovely, the unspoiled bits. It's exploring the non-commercialized elements of this world that we've still got to explore.
A long way from a mast climber.
A long way. Yeah. When you're on holiday, be on holiday. Enjoy the moment.
Something of interest about you, and I know that is of interest about you, that you'd like to get away and just freestyle it remotely. But something about you that not many people would resonate or will know. Maybe it's a hobby, maybe it's an interest, maybe it's something that you do in your spare time. What would that be?
I volunteer down at my local tennis club. So I'm a membership secretary at Leverstock Green. And why it's important to me, why I volunteered, and it comes back to something I've already mentioned about kind of quite passionate about men's mental health. I got myself into quite a bad place probably about 10 years ago now. And so by joining the club, all the aspects from the social side of things, learning a new sport, playing a new sport, love my tennis now. It's unlike golf where I can give a handicap and then everyone goes, "Oh no, he's still rubbish," or you've got an understanding of how good I might be. With tennis, you can't, can you? You just know whether you're going to get absolutely beaten by someone or not. But we're now installing paddle courts, so I get to learn and do another sport. But I love playing all sports. Jack of all trades, master of none of them.
Rob Munns, absolute pleasure, Rob, to have you on the show. If there was anything we needed to cover about mast climbers in 40 odd minutes, I think we covered it to the point that you were very good in terms of the technical aspect. And it was, I know a part of it was technical, but there's a deep underlying theme of the show, which is basically, how can we do things more efficiently? How can we do things safely? And how can we offer value to the customer? And how can we, work collaboratively together in order to solve issues in a practical way that's going to be sustainable for your business and for your clients and for the contractors. And I think you've explained that very well. If people want to get in touch with you, how would they do it? Talk to us about that.
You've got the BFT Mastermind website, and there's an email address on that, which is sales@bftmasterclimbing.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn, as hopefully a lot of your viewers can access that. contact me, DM me. I'll happily then give contact details out if it's not already on LinkedIn. So yeah, really, I'd encourage exactly that. A lot of people, I call them my daft questions.
Yeah.
I start any CPD that I do by letting people know I've only been in the industry 6 years. The reason why that's so important is because it makes other people more comfortable asking questions, because straight away you turn around and say, look, I might not be able to answer them, but I will guarantee that if I can't answer your question, there will be a person in my business who can answer the question, and my job is to deliver the answer to you.
Brilliant. And BFT is B for Brian, F for Frank, T for Thomas, masterclimbing.com. Excellent website. And actually, when you do try to contact them, lo and behold, our friend Rob pops up as the point of contact, and you can schedule a meeting with him. You're pretty busy according to your Calendly invite, but Rob, absolute pleasure. We'll put the links to BFT, yourself, and everything else we spoke about today. Well done, congratulations, and thanks very much for explaining all about mass climbing.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for the invitation and for the questions. Enjoyed it.
Take care, pal. All the best.